Welcome HCI members. Thank you so much for joining us for this webcast, Leading the Charge, Driving the Change, Why Innovators Will Win the War for Talent. We're going to get started with the webcast in just a few moments. Here's a quick look at our agenda today. We'll take care of a couple of housekeeping items, then we'll get right into the feature presentation, and of course we'll be sure to save time for your questions. This webcast, as well as a host of other fascinating content in recruitment, is made possible by the generous support of our friends and partners at Jobvite. Thank you so much. Be sure to visit them online for more information. As a reminder, if you've never joined us on a webcast before, we invite you to share comments, questions, or your own creative best practices at any point throughout the webcast. To do so, what you'll want to do right now is click on the Q&A button at the menu bar on the top of your screen. It will open a question and answer dialog box that you can drag and position anywhere on your screen to keep open throughout the entirety of the webcast. I invite you to do that now, and then when you have a comment or question, you can simply type them into the question and answer interface, and I will be more than happy to present them on your behalf. Our recommended method for listening to today's webcast is through the internet audio broadcast. To do so, instead of over the telephone, you'll want to follow the instructions on your screen right now. Click on the voice and video or just voice button on the menu bar at the top of your screen and click on Join Audio. And if you have any technical difficulties today, please use the Q&A interface that I just described how to open. You can interact with a technical support specialist who will be more than happy to help you. I also want to point out to everyone that you can find the accompanying slides for today's presentation on the community page at hci.org just under the title of this webcast today. Hi, my name is Amy Lewis. I'm the practice leader for both our talent strategy and talent acquisition communities here at the Human Capital Institute. I'm very happy to be with you today and looking forward to an interesting discussion on recruitment innovation. I'm more pleased, however, to say welcome to both of our presenters today. First, we'll extend a warm welcome to Dan Finnegan. Dan has spent his career launching and growing internet businesses with a focus on the recruitment market. Previously, Dan served as the Senior Vice President of Yahoo and the General Manager for Yahoo Hot Jobs, where he doubled revenue between 2002 and 2007. Dan, welcome. We're very pleased to have you with us today.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
We'll also say welcome to Kimberly, and we'll invite her into the conversation later on. Kimberly Casper is the Chief Marketing Officer at Jobvite, and she has more than 20 years of marketing experience delivering bottom lines for leading B2B brands. So, Dan, I know that you're going to get us started today talking about leading the charge, driving the change. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Amy. Everyone, I have a lot to go through in a short period of time. Hopefully I won't be going through it too quickly, and I won't rush my words. For those in the audience who are recruiting professionals, and whether that's you're working inside a company either in charge of recruiting or involved in recruiting, or working in an agency as a recruiting professional, I have an argument today that the world is changing for the profession in both a challenging way, but also in a way that I think is quite optimistic for those of you in this function. And I'd be curious to know your feedback when you watch this. Okay, now let's. All right, that's not working. Okay. First of all, just to give you a little bit of context of who I am and who we are at Jobvite, and this is relevant to the argument that I'm making, and that is a lot of the fastest growing companies in the world now use Jobvite to manage their entire hiring process. You can see many of these companies, from Workday to Guidewire, are quite successful technology IPOs. In addition to that, apologize everyone. In addition to that, this year in 2013, we've already started. Many of the technology IPOs that are taking place this year also use Jobvite to power their hiring. Marin Software, for example, has already gone public, as has Marketo on the right side of the screen. And some of the most successful IPOs, not even technology IPOs, but 2 out of the 3 most successful IPOs last year have used Jobvite. And the reason I bring that up is that these are companies that are experiencing the pain of recruiting skilled workers in our current economy. There is a shortage, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about that, of skilled workers in this country as well as around the world. And recruiting as a result can't continue on the path it has in the past. We need to change what we do to compete. So let me get started a little bit about the job market itself. I've been, as they said, I've been involved in this space for quite some time in online recruiting, really since the early 90s. Most of my experience in the early days was with job boards. And you can see here that the unemployment rate in the United States has been dipping slowly but surely since the rapid rise of the 2008 recession. And I'm showing you the pink part on the left, on the right, to make a significant point, which is, look at all the jobs that were lost in a very short period of time. Those were more layoffs in the history of the United States since the Depression, and they took place over 18 months. We, as a nation, lost 8 million jobs in just 18 months. You can see since then, the economy's been slowly growing, but we've been only adding just enough jobs to kind of keep up with the growth in our population or the growth in the workforce in the United States. But we're really not dramatically decreasing the unemployment rate, as you can see on the left. And this is a big part of my argument about what's taking place right now. I'm rhetorically asking this since this is a webinar, but I wonder how many of you remember these days. Confess I'm old enough that I do remember this. It was the days in which you would post a job in the Sunday newspaper, and on Monday you would get completely inundated with resumes that had been emailed to you. And what happened was that gave birth to the recruitment software industry, which began around 1994 with companies like ResTrack and Resumator. And in fact, I was in charge of Resumix several years ago. And what happened was it created an ability for recruiters to put all these resumes in electronic form and put them in a database. And so you think, wow, if that's the way the world was back then, it's got to be so much better today. And I think those of you who do this for a living know it just feels like things are getting faster, faster, and faster, and you can't keep up. Well, I do think that is true. And I think that the profession of recruiting is being challenged more than it ever has in the past. It's just, you can't just hire a recruiter, you can't just post a job. You've got to do more to compete for the best talent than ever before. But it's my contention that if we as a profession do that, that the role of recruiting inside a company is without a doubt going to become more important to the CEO, more important to the senior executives, more important to the CFO than it ever has in the past. And so let's talk a little bit about that. First of all, what you see here is a slide of the stock returns in red of the S&P 500. In blue is the stock returns of Fortune 100's best companies to work for. And you can see that the companies that, with the Forbes study, have been, which is, by the way, a publishing of a Boston Consulting Group study, that the companies that are best managed around people provide better stock returns. So there's a growing awareness among CEOs and senior executives that talent management matters way more than they ever thought in the past. But when you peel back the different pieces of human resources, what's traditionally called human resources, This is the Boston Consulting Group study as well. And you look at the return on investment that those activities provide the company, you can see here that recruiting delivers the most profit growth of any HR function, and not by a little, but by a lot. 3.5x profit growth compared to the next best performing function in human resources, onboarding and retention. So, not only do companies perform better when there's better talent management, that recruiting is a big driver of that. Now, one good news for those of you, as I said, who are in the profession of recruiting, you can see here the demand just over the last few years for people with recruiting in their title, someplace in their title, has been growing steadily, 14% just year over year. So why is this happening? First of all, I'm going to show how I think businesses today need skilled talent more than ever. Second, talent is becoming increasingly scarce worldwide. And third, as a result, the behavior of skilled talent is different than ever before and makes them a greater challenge to recruit. Therefore, recruiters are going to have to transform themselves from merely sales to being marketing and salespeople. Recruiting is essentially becoming marketing, and that's, I believe, a great opportunity. First of all, skilled talent. What you see here is a chart from the Bureau of Labor Statistics of the United States, looking at the change in employment from 2010 to 2020. And as you can see, dramatically more of all the job growth that will be taking and that is taking place over the next 8 to 10 years requires more than a high school education. And you can see how slow the job growth is for jobs that require high school or less. Second, if you look at just the most advertised job openings in the United States on job boards and around the internet, all but 2 of the top 10 require college education. Only information and record clerks and supervisors of sales workers don't. This is a study from the Brookings Institute. And I think another very fascinating stat is that just years ago, before the launch of the first smartphone or iPhone, obviously there were no jobs tied to the smartphone app economy. And today, there's over 500,000 jobs now tied to the smartphone app economy. And on the right are some job titles from the Jobvite platform today for jobs that probably 6, 7, 8 years ago didn't even exist. So my point here is that these jobs that require an education in the future, one of the reasons they require an education is there's no specific training one can take to prepare for it. In fact, the talent that can fulfill these roles has to actually create the job, learn the job while doing the job. That there's great speed and dynamism in the creation of the jobs in the future, and therefore the best qualified people are those with the best education. In fact, a SHRM survey of companies confirmed this as well. You can see that most companies intend to stay, if not decrease, the number of people that they are hiring with a high school diploma or equivalent. But as you go up with the degrees and the college degrees, you can see that their demand for those workers is increasing, according to the SHRM survey. But a challenge is that in the developed world, where the service and technology influenced economies are most at work, we have actually a decreasing working age population. It's hard to see this, but in light blue is the population growth between 1970 and 2010, 40 years. In the dark blue is the projected working age population growth from 2010 to 2050. And you can see, shocking to many people who see this data, that Germany, Japan, Italy, Russia, Spain, the Netherlands, South Korea, China are all going to shrink over the next 50 years. And any economist will tell you the single worst thing that can happen to an economy is for the population to shrink. And in the United States, actually, we have some good news. Our population is growing at a much greater clip than almost any other developed nation around the world, but that's less to do with birth rates than it has to do with projected immigration. One of the envies of the U.S. economy around the world is our university system. This is the institutions that create the college graduates that we so now need. And in fact, I just spent many of the last few weeks traveling the country with my son looking at many universities for him to choose from. This is a list of the winners of a contest, essentially a logic and computer programming contest that started in 1993, sponsored by the University of Baylor and IBM. And you can see in the first year of this contest, all of the university, all the 12 winners, top 12 winners, were U.S. universities except for 3. A university in New Zealand, our friends in Canada with University of Waterloo, number 7, and a Chinese university at number 11. Now, if you look, last year, only 1 U.S. university won that contest. And the significance of this is pretty great, that the United States has had a big supply of college graduates over the last 50 years feed our economy. And in fact, it used to be that the immigration population that came to the United States to go to college, that about 70% of them would stay in the United States to work. That 70% has dropped now to 50%. And the U.S. share of all foreign students has dropped from a steady state 25%, where it was for many decades, and it's dropped to as low as 18% in the last few years. So we are not necessarily getting all the best minds, the best students, and the best thinkers, and the best innovators coming to our country anymore. The net of this is that in the United States, we essentially have a 2-tiered labor market. We have one labor market for those, unfortunately, who have not gone beyond high school, where the unemployment rate, as you can see in the red bar at the bottom left, hovers around 8.3%. For those with less than a high school diploma, it's actually 12.4%. But as soon as you move up the educational graduate degrees, you can see the unemployment rate drops pretty dramatically. And most economists will tell you if an unemployment rate is between 3% or less, you essentially have what's called frictional unemployment, meaning that there's not enough people to provide the mobility needed for companies to create new jobs, fill those jobs, and grow their organizations. And so we are at the brink here when it comes to skilled labor and college graduates. And here's some evidence of that. The state of Florida, out of the governor's office, did a study late last year, and they found that just in the state of Florida, there was a shortage of 50,000 STEM workers to fill their STEM jobs. On the left is 64,000 STEM jobs, and on the right is something like 14,000 STEM graduates in Florida alone. STEM meaning science, technology, engineering, and math graduates. So there's a big shortage. And there's a point I want to make here that's critical to our argument. And that is, it used to be we were, as we all know and we all learned, that we were a manufacturing economy before World War II. And World War II actually accelerated our expansion as a nation as a manufacturing economy. And that continued until the 60s or so. And then we started to shift from manufacturing to services. And what is happening now, and this is happening worldwide, not just in the United States, is that the combination of the internet, the combination of software, the combination of with data and data analysis is essentially transforming every single industry worldwide, from agriculture to transportation to retail to medicine to any industry, even the industries where you think there would be little impact. And the result is that all the companies who are trying to compete in these industries worldwide are going after STEM graduates. The fastest growing major in the United States, unfortunately, is parks, recreation, and fitness. And that's certainly not going to meet our needs. I mentioned immigration and the importance of it historically for the United States. I'm sure most of you are aware that there's been a debate raging, lots of debates rage in Washington, D.C. with very little getting done, and this is another example. There's been a debate for the last, I'd say, 8-9 months in Washington about immigration policy. And the good news is that we've had a bump up in the last year or two in foreign students enrolling in the United States. And in fact, I told you our share of foreign students had dropped from 25% to 18%. It's now back up to 21%. But the big problem is that we capped the number of student graduates who can stay and work in the United States at 85,000 a year, and only and limited to 20,000 for those with advanced degrees. There is a proposed bill to increase that cap to a meager 115 or up to 300,000, and most economists will say we need that to be over 300,000 to meet the demand in the United States alone. But there's been no activity on this, so it doesn't seem to provide a ray of hope yet to those of us who are trying to fill these jobs. You know, the result of this is you have a new company in San Francisco just started in the last year called 10X Programmer Talent Agency. And the model is essentially just like you see in Hollywood, that programmers in the Bay Area, computer programmers in the Bay Area, and now they have opened up a branch in New York, are so inundated from recruiters reaching out to them that they're hiring agents to manage all their negotiations for their future job opportunities. To me, this is probably the best living example of the impact of this shortage that we have. So, what can we do about it? One thing to think about this generation that is now of young, skilled workers, some of whom are now hiring agents to work on their behalf, and we need to look about how they think about work. Now, go back to that first slide I showed you about unemployment. Because this is a webinar, I couldn't show you a little movie that I often show when I give this talk that illustrates visually how many jobs were lost in 2008 or 9. It really is breathtaking how many and how fast. What that did was teach all these generations, but especially Generation Y, that they're on their own, that they cannot rely on any company to provide them a career path. And in fact, while they're working their current job, they need to always be thinking about their next opportunity, their next step in their career. And so, given the accessibility of the internet and mobile devices, they're always available, reachable, and they're always searching and looking. And that has big implications, I think, for recruiters, without a doubt. And when you look at the demographics of hiring in the United States, you can see baby boomers started to reach retirement age just a few years ago in 2011, and now Generation Y in, what is this now, 3-4 years, is going to make up half the working age population in the United States. And Generation X, I'm the oldest of Generation X, or the youngest of Generation Y, is going to start retiring, the youngest of boomer generation, is going to start retiring in 2030. So the majority of the working age population in just 4 to 5 years is going to be this Generation Y, who has these different attitudes about building their career, and for good reason. When I first started, as I said, I've been in the online recruiting space for quite some time. When I first made a proposal to create something called the job board back in 1994, when I was at the Los Angeles Times, we looked at research that showed that my father's generation, part of the traditionalist at the end of the World War II generation, was going to had changed jobs 4 times, or was expected to change jobs 4 times throughout their entire career, and that my generation was going to change jobs 7 to 8 times, more than doubling it, therefore expanding the market for recruiting. Well, if you just graduated from college or are a senior in college right now, you can expect to change jobs every 3 years, as opposed to the now median average of 4.4, and therefore have 15 to 20 jobs over a lifetime. So this is the evidence that we have a scarcity of the people who can do the work. The work that's being created requires increasingly skilled labor. That skilled labor is aware of this and trying to negotiate the best opportunities for them that they can, and they're never not looking for the next one. That, to me, requires a different approach to recruiting. And essentially, as I said earlier, recruiting needs to become marketing. It's just like any company that has a product in a competitive market that's trying to attract their consumers who are always shopping for the next best deal. Well, let's just look at this Generation Y for a second. Here's some research about them that may or may not impact how you market and sell your company as a place for them to work. 46% have exercised in the last 24 hours. So now you start to see the importance of access to gyms, for example, in the job. 39% have a tattoo. Old school people who have a problem with that probably need to get over that. 35% have started a business on the side. So not only are they always looking for the next best opportunity, this generation actually believes the best thing they can do is to start their own business and not necessarily work for a big company for many years. 27% have seen their email usage drop. Why? Because they're always on a smartphone, they're texting each other, they're on social networks, and that's how they're communicating. And 21% think helping the poor is the most important issue facing our generation. So, why do I bring these things up? Because you need to define your job openings and your company as a product that you market to people like this. You need to define your product broadly around the entire customer experience. There's a lot of talk today about Amazon buying the Washington Post. And a lot of the analysts are saying Amazon creates the best consumer experience online along with Apple, and that will be a great thing for the Washington Post. But what kind of consumer experience do you want to provide the buyers of your jobs? Obviously, you've got to price it so that you provide competitive value. You've got to promote your positions the way your peers in marketing down the hallway have had their whole profession transformed from message and media marketing to digital marketing. So you got to have a ROI tracked funnel. How you place your product, meaning this is called distribution, how you make your product findable and viewable and engageable. Like, think of this as Apple retailing iPhones both on their website, but also on retail stores. And then finally, and maybe most importantly, the fifth P, the new fifth P of marketing is process. Essentially managing this as an entire single funnel that's being optimized over time. And I'll get a little more into that in a moment. So let's just look at the first one. And the second one, product and pricing. You need to design your roles for the future of this generation, not just your future. Generation Y, for example, are job shoppers, not job hoppers. 88% are now looking to make a change. They don't just look at salaries as a guidepost for value. They look at other things like how much progress are they making in their job titles. And 51% who've just accepted a new job have already buyer's remorse. So here is one study from Harvard Business Review that suggested how you can improve the attractiveness of your job. You need to be able to explain the company's vision, perhaps involve community service as part of the worker experience or the employee experience. As I just alluded to, develop a lot of intermediate steps for an employee to go from a junior analyst to an analyst to a senior analyst, and think about providing that movement for them that they're looking for, that reassures them that they're making progress in their career. There's been a lot in the news, by the way, about number 5, about offering flexibility, work from home. Obviously, a lot of talk about the need for continuous feedback, not an annual job review, but continuous feedback. Certainly providing education and professional development. And let them, as Google does, as many people know, have time just to work on professional projects on their own. Another thing is you need to not just have a brand that is about your products and your services, but to create, and I'm sure many of you heard about and read about, the importance of creating an employment brand. Because college graduates, the people that we're trying to get younger and younger now with these skills that are in demand, look to start with companies with brands. And these are the top 5 brands that they list of where they want to work right out of college. Okay. But the brand experience cannot be oversold. It needs to be authentic. Essentially, someone recently said that the culture of a company is what people are saying in the backyard barbecue when the boss is not around. Hopefully that's not a negative discussion. And if it's a positive discussion, that's essentially what you have to market, so that people who are looking for work can get a sense of what it would be like to be there. And marketers, if you read some of the latest research on marketing, there's a lot of talk about the importance of having messaging and a brand that communicates to the limbic part of the brain that emotionally connects to products and emotionally connects to experiences. One thing I recommend is that you survey your top performers, and based on that survey to get a sense of why they are where they are, why do they like the company, why they are engaged with the company, then develop value statements around that. Then once you have that, those value statements and the results of that survey, you really need to mold all your marketing messaging and your recruiting efforts around it. Just the way the CMO would have white papers and testimonials about the use of your products, you need to do the same thing about the experiences of employees. And one way to think about this as well is that if it's really working and working well, your culture is actually going to help make your job easier. In other words, employees will self-select themselves out of your candidate pool because they can just see that they're not going to fit in. And those that see that this is the perfect place for them will more aggressively seek the role. A good example of this is HubSpot. They launched a couple of months ago an over 100-slide, mostly pictures, presentation on the web to depict their culture and their code of working at HubSpot. And it was very viral and it took off. And if you I would highly recommend you go search it on Google and find it. It's a great example of how, with very few words, they authentically communicated what you can't look through those slides and not get a sense of what it would be like to work at HubSpot. Another example is Twitter's career site that Jobvite hosts. You can see, and from this and all the content, why we work here, for example, of their site, that they really try to communicate the sense of what it's like to join their flock, to be a part of them. It's a beautiful website, and I highly recommend you go look at that. A completely different kind of website that is a completely different company culture is Kixeye. Kixeye is a gaming a gaming company, and the games are really targeted to males, and they're around military-oriented games. And you can see this is their front page of their career site. And in order to look at anything, you have to essentially step into the game as if you were playing a game. Click on that center part, and it pulls you in while looking for jobs is almost like playing the game. And again, the users of that site get a sense of what it's like to work there and to live there. Our own Jobvite career site, we try to depict what would it be like to join our family and be one of us. So now you have to promote. And we know that the world of promotion and marketing in the digital world has completely been transformed by all the different online media options that are available. From Google search to search engine optimization to the creation and distribution of content to the purchasing of online ads, as well now in the world of the social sharing of all of the above. So here, let me show you something that's relevant for recruiting here. What you're seeing here is all the applications that have taken place on the Jobvite platform this year to date so far. And you can see that in green, most of the applications are still coming from the job boards that I was a part of in the 90s and the 2000s. A lot of applications. They still drive a lot of applications. The second best source of applications, though, is our customer's own career site, like the Kixeye website I was showing you, or the Twitter website. And then in red, 8.5% now of the applications are coming from employee referrals. You can also see 1.2% now are coming from companies building their own database of prospects. Now, when you look at where are the hires coming from, you can see there's a dramatic difference. The majority of the hires on the Jobvite platform are coming from employees using social referral capabilities on the platform. 40% of the hires are some form of employee referral. And then the next best source is the company's own career site. Job boards still drive 17%, and you can see the rest there. So what that means is you have to have a multimedia, multi-channel approach to driving applications and making hires. But they're not all created equal. If you look at the employee referrals, 55% faster are the hires made from employee referral. In other words, if you get an application from an employee referral and compare how quickly you hire them in general as opposed to those that come from the career site, it's 55% faster. And then we looked at, well, are they in fact better hires? Because every employee gets an account and is logged into Jobvite, we went and looked at the data and saw that employee referrals actually last longer than any other source of hire on the Jobvite platform. So you can see the economics in this recruiting as marketing is significant if you can get the Generation Y, for example, to not change jobs every 3 years in your company, but every 4 years, for example. Another interesting phenomenon is that if you are, let's say, running a website on the selling of shoes like our customer at Zappos, in general, an e-commerce website, about half the people who go to an e-commerce website end up not completing the purchase. Well, about the same thing happens now on career sites as well. About half the people who visit a career site do not end up completing the application. So what do marketers do if they are selling shoes online and half the people are abandoning the purchase process? They remarket them on ad networks. They cookie them, and then wherever they go on the web, they remind them that you visited Zappos, you visited my e-commerce site. Are you sure you don't want to revisit and complete the purchase? Recruiters can behave like marketers and do the same thing with their career sites. That technology exists. Okay, let's talk more about the career site, because that's essentially your product placement, where people experience the shopping experience, your version of the Apple Store. First, it needs to be easy to find, follow, and engage. One of our customers, Square, does, I think, a very elegantly simple job of bucketing all applicants or all job seekers into one of three types: creative, engineering, and business on the bottom. And if you click on one of those, it's like going to a completely different part of the department store. Engineers go into the middle door and have a different experience than the people on the creative side who go to the left door. Again, they're thinking about the shopping experience for these different target segments. The application process needs to be simple, clear. So RMS, which has won, I think, every year, the last 2 to 3 years, like, for example, the Candy Award for the best career site. This is what they do using Jobvite, a very simple apply process about you, your resume. You can apply with LinkedIn, add a cover letter, boom, you're done. It's easy to buy. And coming soon, you've got to take very seriously now mobile. People are going to be applying for jobs on their smartphones when they are on the train riding home from a day that they did not enjoy at work. Then the final key thing about the shopping experience for your job seekers is the actual interview process. It needs to be collaborative, and there are ways to keep tabs and keep connected to high-profile candidates and high-profile applicants. Make it easy for your recruiters, make it easy for your hiring managers to keep in touch with people so that you don't lose them and they go somewhere else as opposed to stick with you. And obviously modern tools like Jobvite enable you to do that the same way that modern tools enable marketers to stay closely connected with their prospects. I'm sure many of you have used Skype in the interviewing process. Another soon-to-be, I think, very convenient way is native and unified in the Jobvite platform will be the ability for your applicants to say more about themselves online, on video, so that you then can later search it based on their answers and digest it and share it with your hiring managers. There's been studies that show that young applicants, if they're not allowed to communicate, for example, via Skype, it reflects poorly on the company, like it's an old-school company that they don't want to work for. And then finally, you've got to provide a shopping experience that provides feedback. So, for example, this is the page that applicants via Jobvite can see via a Facebook application. They've applied to multiple companies here, and they can see what's the status of my application. Is anyone opening it? Are they scheduling an interview? Have I been not selected? This is a generation that does not appreciate the black hole of recruiting and wants to have continuous feedback of where they stand. And then finally, all of this needs to be pulled together into one marketing and sales process. All efforts need to work as one. Prospecting at the top, bringing in those leads into your funnel, nurturing them, starting a great sales process, and then closing the sale. multimedia campaigns, taking those leads and moving them from cold to warm, keeping tabs of people in an automated way, moving them down the funnel, and then ultimately screening, interview, hiring, and then looking at the analytics and having that adjust over time. There are multiple tools for doing that on Jobvite, building a talent pool on the right, running campaigns, and also having employee referrals on the left to fill the top of the funnel, having campaigns to nurture and warm, and looking at the analytics to see what's working and what's not working over time. We have designed our product line essentially from the top to the bottom of the funnel. That's why we designed the products that we have to transform recruiting from what historically was mostly a sales process, post a job ad, get an applicant, and then have a sales process, to an ongoing, continuously being optimized marketing and sales funnel, just the way marketing is managing in the hallway, as I said, down the hallway. And if you successfully do this, it is my argument, and you have a continuous inflow of prospects into the top of your funnel through multiple channels, and you are consistently warming them in the middle of the funnel and then closing the best of them at the bottom of the funnel, there is no doubt in this labor market where the competition for skilled work is only going to get increasingly fierce that you as a recruiter and our profession is going to have a higher and higher profile and drive more and more value in business growth into the future. I really appreciate your time and attention, and we've left more than enough time for questions as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan, so much for that very holistic overview of the current state of recruiting and its challenges and some solutions. As Dan mentioned, we do have time for questions, so HCI members, I'll encourage you that if you haven't had a chance to get your question entered into the question and answer interface, I'll encourage you to go ahead and do that now, and we'll get to as many as we can in the time that we have remaining. So I know, Kimberly, we're going to direct questions over your way and welcome into the conversation. We're very pleased to have you with us. I'd like to know from your perspective, while we open it up to the audience's questions, I'd like to know, Kimberly, from your perspective and from that of Dan's, given both of your backgrounds extensively in recruitment, what do you see as next on the horizon in recruitment technology? Certainly the ideas behind attracting and selecting top talent never change, but maybe the methods do, and you can share with us a preview of what's coming next.
Well, let me take a bit of that before I have to go, and then Kimberly can follow up. I'd like her point of view on this as well. But I think it's very important to realize that this is a continuous process from here on out. Software has been transformed. It's not now an industry where you build a product and then you market and sell the heck out of it. It's all now on the internet. It's what we call SaaS software, software as a service. So there's continuous ongoing innovation that needs to take place to be competitive, whether you're providing recruiting software or performance management software or even software in the finance profession. It's continually going to have to be innovative. Now, that innovation is going to take place across that entire funnel. So the opportunities for the targeting of people based on what you learn on who takes your jobs and who doesn't take your jobs, who stays at your jobs, who doesn't stay at your job, and then targeting to find more people like the successful ones on internet networks, whether those are social networks, advertising networks, what have you, is definitely going to be a big trend in the future as key in marketing. But even at the bottom of the funnel, the whole usability of collaboration in the hiring process itself, and how one thing that I didn't really touch on is that because people change jobs so frequently, it used to be that a hiring manager hired somebody with the expectation that person's going to work for them over a long period of time. Well, if both sides of that partnership now are changing jobs every 3 years, the likelihood that you're going to have the same boss for more than a year or two is quite low. Just do the math on that churn. Therefore, what's happening is companies are involving many more people in the hiring process. Groups of people are making the decisions, not individual hiring managers. Therefore, the hiring process at the bottom of the funnel is going to have to get increasingly collaborative.
Thank you for sharing that. So you also previewed for us that, of course, mobile is something next to think about, and it's a shockingly low number of even the Fortune 500 that have mobile-ready sites. You mentioned, too, the shift demographically from the use of personal computers to the use of mobile devices. What are some steps that we can take to get ready for that mobile conversion?
Well, the practical reality is that it's been a very quick and dramatic change from internet usage going from laptops and computers to mobile devices, especially smartphones. So that therefore, mobile is going to impact all parts of the hiring process. For example, obviously, and the one that I've alluded to is how your actual candidates and prospects interact with you via their smartphone, apply for a job, as well as I showed in that Facebook app, give feedback on what's the status of their job. But mobile is also going to impact the behavior of hiring managers. If you do research on the pain points of recruiters, a lot of their frustration is around coordinating with hiring managers who don't necessarily do what they say they're going to do, or don't follow through when they said they would. By the fact of the matter is, very few hiring managers can or want to log into a recruiting software application. But mobile is going to be the way for them to participate much more effortlessly, for example, over time. What that means then is if you have older, aging recruiting software, you're going to have to possibly relook at that.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question from Carl in the audience, and Carl is suggesting that more and more recruiting professionals are looking for integrated and holistic recruitment technologies. Kimberly or Dan, what's your sort of approach to how we get less systems in front of recruiters?
Well, I think, this is Dan again, I think this is an important topic because we've been hearing now for many years the importance of the talent management suite. And it is Jobvite's view that recruiting is recruiting, and it's really important. And that performance management is performance management, and it's very important. And that the way 5 years from now employees are reviewed and performance reviewed online is going to be different than it is today. And that the way people are prospected and moved down the recruiting marketing funnel and ultimately hired 5 years from now is going to be different than it is today. And that the most likely provider of the way it's going to be done 5 years from now is a company who's only focused on performance reviews as opposed to a company that's only focused on recruiting. That said, enterprises do need that base infrastructure of HRIS systems that probably are tied to a larger suite provider, but the business process of recruiting is a standalone function. The synergies with other HR functions are quite nebulous, and in fact, I think it's dangerous to accept the throw-in module, the throw-in recruitment module of a suite provider who only views recruiting software as the old applicant tracking software functionality and is not keeping up with recruiting as a marketing function.
Mm-hmm. And recruiting is also, there's a recent study that came out that said recruiting has the biggest impact on the profitability of the company. Mm-hmm. And so that's not the place you want to make a compromise. Right? There's CEOs that come out and said that they have delayed projects because they didn't have the right people, or strategic initiatives because they didn't have the right talent for the company. So recruiting is incredibly important and absolutely is not the place to compromise.
That's a great point. I mean, really, at the end of the day, the imperative of hiring the right talent is so important. that it doesn't seem like it's a place where we would want to have less than the best tools, since it's something that we continually talk about, how do I select more and better people? You would think that you would want to make the process and procedure side as easy and as seamless as possible.
Exactly.
So that does bring me to a question from Ben, which is, we continually talk about how recruitment can get this proverbial seat at the table. From your perspective, what's the table stakes here? What do you have to have as a recruitment leader to be able to get the seat there?
Well, you really have to leverage your data, right? It's all about knowing that funnel and knowing how you're converting and how you're moving people through that funnel and letting your metrics talk for you and speak to the results that you're bringing. Making sure that you're a data-driven organization and that you're not just finding people, but how are you finding those people? How are you moving them through the funnel? And how are you making sure the right people are in the right roles for your company? That's how marketing ended up getting a seat at the table, right?
Sure.
It's not all about the fluffy brand and advertising. It's about the impact we're making on the bottom line of the company. And recruiting and HR leaders need to think about it in the same way.
Kimberly, what are your favorite recruitment metrics right now in terms of being able to really sort of open up the measurement side of recruitment? So thinking, these are the things that really get to the core of how successfully we're doing our job.
Right. It's time to hire. How long those people are staying on once you've hired them. How quickly you're able to get someone from bringing them in at the top to actually having them interview and making an offer and bringing them on board. It's knowing every single conversion rate through that funnel and being able to articulate those conversion rates.
Great ideas. We do hear a lot about big data, especially as it relates to recruiting. Is there a concern on your end that at some point we have the cart leading the horse instead of the horse leading the cart? I mean, how do we end up with the right balance between good data and then numbers just for their own sake?
Well, I think that's always a challenge, right? You can always get stuck in kind of analysis paralysis if you want to. So it's really understanding what metrics matter and making sure that you're tracking those over time so that you can really understand trends and how they apply to your business. Once you start tracking data, you'll know what metrics are important and you'll know what metrics are really going to drive your story across your company and what metrics your CEO is going to care about. Impact on the bottom line is always the metrics they're going to care about. And if you can figure out how to track that and convey that the right way, I don't think you're going to get stuck in analysis paralysis. You'll have an easy metric to convey.
We found in research at HDI when we've asked this type of question in a survey form when we're sort of actually researching which metrics move the needle on things like driving business impact or getting that seat at the table, that most people would like to hear that there is one metric that will sort of be the golden key to open that gate. And in actuality, it really is dependent on the organization, what matters most to them, what's more important to them culturally, what sort of drives, what attitudes they take towards their business model. So unfortunately, there isn't a panacea there. It is something that you have to develop on your own.
That's right.
Well, I'm afraid that we are out of time today, but I want to say thank you very much once again to Dan Finnegan, the Chief Executive Officer at Jobvite, and Kimberly Casper, the Chief Marketing Officer at Jobvite. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you for having us.
And thanks once again to Jobvite for bringing us this webcast today and for a host of great content on HCI.org. So thank you. Stay tuned, HCI members. We have another webcast starting in just a couple of minutes. Have a great day.